Welcome to Block and Build, a podcast from Convergence Magazine. I'm your host and the publisher of Convergence, Caden Mock. On this show, we're building a roadmap for the movement that's working to block the impacts of rising authoritarianism while building the strength and resilience of the broad front that we need to win. And before we begin, I want to mark our first movement memorial of the year. Helen S. Kim, who was a mentor to me and many of my friends and comrades, passed away suddenly this week. She was an organizer, a coach, a visionary who really knew how to bring out the best in people and help them reconnect to their purpose. She was someone who valued beauty, play, and creativity as part of the work of our movements. We already miss you so much, Helen, and your work and your words will live on through us. I have no headlines to read today because we're doing another edition of the Attention Economy Navigator. The goal of this show has always been to help organizers figure out what's happening, how people are responding, and get a sense for what's working out there in the world. With that in mind, we are pleased to present another Attention Economy Navigator for January. This concept came out of a conversation I had with Nima Shirazi about Naomi Klein's 2023 book, Doppelganger. One of my biggest takeaways from reading the book was that Klein suggests a new political spectrum in addition to left and right that defines political division in our society, and that the determining factor of that division is how prominently conspiratorial thinking shapes your political views. Conspiracy theory has pretty much always been an aspect of public life in the United States, but it's hard to deny the way that online dis and misinformation, COVID, and the clickbait attention economy have supercharged conspiratorial thinking, regardless of your political commitments. Conspiracy theory and extremely online politics are also now in power, complicating the ways that conspiracy and the internet impact our lives. So we thought, maybe it's time to start talking about this a little more explicitly on the show. Here's how the Navigator is going to work. My panelists and I will plot some curated news stories from the past month or so onto a two-dimensional graph, reflecting where we think they fall on a spectrum of conspiracy theory to consensus reality and from signal to noise, to try and make sense of what we're preoccupied with and why. Since we've only done this format once before, I'll explain it again. And it might be helpful to go back to your high school geometry class to envision a standard XY graph. On the x-axis, we're measuring signal versus noise, with high signal on the far right of the graph and high noise on the far left. Noisy stories are those that have little meaning. They're part of the chatter, but they're not going to stick with us. They don't mean much to our long-term media and political environment. Contrast that with high signal stories, which have deep and long-term implications and impact on our world. Then we've got the y-axis, where we're measuring consensus reality versus conspiracy theory. High consensus stories are those that are really happening. These don't involve a lot of wild conjecture or fuzzy logic. They're backed up by research, reporting, and hard evidence. High conspiracy stories are those which, contrary to all reason, have broken through despite having very little to back them up. They're rooted in conspiracy theories of some kind. So this leaves us with four quadrants. The top right is high signal, high consensus. These are stories that are meaty and deserve our attention. Those that are high noise and high conspiracy fall in the bottom left and probably deserve a little less of it, even if people can't stop talking about them. If you're a visual learner and feel lost, do not worry. The finalized graph plot is linked in the show notes and can be found in Convergence's website for you to follow along. You can also always pop over to watch this episode on our YouTube channel, where our producer Josh helps lay out the graph in real time. To help build this month's Attention Economy Navigator, I am joined by two experts in narrative strategy who spend a lot of time thinking about what we're talking about and why. Joining me today are returning guests and friends of the show. First, program specialist for research and content at Reframe, Shaira Chayers. Shaira, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Caden, for having me.
And we are also joined by North Carolina-based organizer and narrative strategist, Jess St. Louis. Jess, it is always good to see you, friend.
Hey, it's good to be here with y'all.
All right, so we've already collected a number of headlines for our discussion today because it is only the second week of January, but boy, oh boy, is it happening. And by it, I mean everything. So I'm going to invite each of you in turn to introduce us to a story, and then we'll put about 5 minutes on the clock for your explanation and where you think it should live on the graph. And then we can shoot the shit a little bit about it and figure out where we, in consensus, might want to put it. Are y'all ready?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Go.
All right. Well, let's start with a story that I think was maybe a little undercovered this week just because of everything happening in Minneapolis. Jess, I know you were in D.C. for the Supreme Court hearings on school athletics bans for trans women and girls. Could you tell us a little bit about this story and what the case is about and where you think it belongs on our graph?
Yeah, absolutely. So As folks may have known, the right wing has really been kind of capturing people's imaginations and inviting people to join their movement through stories about transgender athletes, specifically transgender women who are athletes. Really grounded in stories about innate biological differences between people who are assigned male at birth and people who are assigned female at birth, and kind of in a very outdated gender binary, I would argue patriarchal way, is that people assigned male at birth are inherently stronger and people assigned female at birth are inherently weaker.
Mm-hmm.
And using that as a way to go after, should public schools actually include everybody? Do public schools supposed to care for and include everyone, including trans people and non-binary people? But that's the question at hand: is who is involved in the public and who gets to be seen as part of it, and have their gender seen and recognized and heard. And so these two cases are about two transgender women who were denied the ability to play with their friends on their sports teams, like the project in West Virginia and get the woman's name in Idaho. And so right now it's kind of gone up the courts. And at this point, it's at the Supreme Court. Essentially, like, well, the Supreme Court could rule in a range of ways. They could rule in ways that make for trans inclusion. They could rule in ways that have very narrow implication around trans rights, being like this is specifically just about sports. Or it could go very wide ranging and essentially say that trans people are not included in anti-discrimination law at all, and don't have any rights under anti-discrimination law, particularly in relationship to public institutions like schools. So there were a range of forces that were out. On our side, there's a lot of pro-LGBTQ folks, Black and brown trans-led organizations. And then on the opposition was actually a very organized, like positioned as diverse right. It was overwhelmingly white folks, men and women, but their stories were very much all about save women's sports, protect biological reality, etc. And I think on both sides, actually talking about other side being conspiratorial thinking.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Our side were being like, this is all, like, most of us, like, there is not ground for these claims that trans women will remove opportunities, possibilities for cisgender women. And then on the other side, it's like, it's going to happen. They're all cheaters. All trans women are cheaters who are trying to get legs up and steal opportunities from cisgender women. So there's conspiratorial thinking, I would say. And that is happening as a minor side issue, where I think it's really the story is about entrenching stories about gender and gender binaries and about what's the role of government and our institutions. And that's my assessment. And also, we know that these gender bans have already had this intense impact on cis and intersex people, particularly folks of color.
Totally.
And so all of that to say, my hunch in this matrix, I would argue that this is high signal. And I would say it's kind of a little bit towards the middle line of between conspiracy and reality is where I would position it. So that's where I would probably put that, where I would put that conversation. And I'm curious about, I know Shaira did a lot of research on narratives around trans athletes inside of their role at Reframe. And so I'm curious on both of y'all's thoughts.
Yeah, I wish we could cut this in half and put part of it in reality and part of it in conspiracy. Because depending on where you go and what you read and who you hear, it can be either real or completely just inaccurate, false, and transphobic and misogynistic.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm on the side of like arguing for this moving a little bit more towards the conspiracy side. I think for this reason that you point out, Jess, that like this is not just about the like specific case of letting these trans girls play school sports, but this is actually about like how do we police gender? How do we police race? How do we like even think about the government's obligation to us as citizens, as like members of a society, that like it is a way of sort of cloaking this sort of like, I don't know. I feel like we've talked about this before about the sort of like public choice economics, like thing that this is like a rehearsal of, in a lot of ways, what Nancy MacLean writes about in Democracy in Chains about race, that they're doing the same, it's the same playbook, but it's about gender. And it feels deeply conspiratorial to me.
I can definitely rock with that assessment, that it leans towards that, I think, that conspiratorial side of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've also been grappling with as I was marshaling, I was out listening to their opposition speakers. One, I think in some ways there's part of their opposition stories is that trans people are conspiracy themselves. In ways that they're like, trans people don't exist.
Right.
So we're feeding into delusions of people's gender and self-determination, or that we shouldn't, right? And so there's this these conspiracies, again, just not to be crude, but part of what they were saying was oh my God, these confused males will never get to have sex and orgasm ever again if they are allowed to become trans. And, as a trans person, I just laugh because I'm just
why are they so obsessed?
One,
I know.
Listen, two, baby girl, you don't know what's going on in my bedroom or other people's bedrooms, just to be very clear.
Look.
There's this conspiracy about them. Yeah. And I think it's really preying on, and it's really, I think, creating this sense of this very interesting, I would say, inside of the stories about gender is this very victim stance for cis women.
Yes.
That they're not strong. They're not oh my God, young people are too confused to know ourselves at all. But I think inside of all of that, there's this kind of fear thing of we're both brave, but we're weak. They're sitting in these kind of contradictory stories about what it means to be a woman, while they have Linda McMahon, who's running as Secretary of Education, right? And Mike Johnson at their speaker at their table, and they have governing power. And so this really, really weird side, and yeah. And so I will say there's one YouTube little edit that happened where I saw one of the opposition speakers be like, I am so scared about me and my kids and my child, and we're having to be brave. And they showed a quick shot of snipers on the roof of this, and then cut back, and I was like,
who knows sniper?
I thought the snipers were for them.
Right.
I'm just grappling with this kind of story of
yeah.
Oh my God, we're so small and weak and innocent, while they actually are wielding massive power to do massive harm.
Well, I think that this thread about who's the victim is a really big, to me, it's a through line of conspiracy theory, right? Is that conspiracy theory is often about trying to position somebody as a victim. And Shaira, I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about was Project 2026. You tell us a little bit about this thing and what your read on it is.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about gender, and part of 2026 is actually to kind of ramp up the attacks against women, children, queer, trans, and non-binary people. And you might not get that sense from reading their very short PDF. Nothing like the 900 pages of Project 2025 that they published, right?
And they is the Heritage Foundation, right?
Yes, the Heritage Foundation. That's right. And so the 2026 plan is really designed to control bodies, cisgender bodies, transgender bodies, and everyone in between, right? Erase the freedom of choice, erase people's ability to decide if and when they want to start a family, what family looks like, erase LGBTQ plus people from not just, public life, but also from the protection from major institutions like healthcare or education, for example. I know Jess had just talked about it in relationship to the debates from SCOTUS. And then there's something here around the language of family, right? And so it is very much patriarchal, very much the state is going to tell you, small woman, fragile little creature, how you are supposed to be, assuming roles of gender, meaning nuclear family, meaning you don't get to work, you don't get to vote, you don't get to move or jump or speak unless the state says that that's okay. And it's not just around abortion, it is also around access to education, and the democratic right to vote, for example. So again, you will not see this in the pages, but in between the very jargony legalese, that is exactly what Heritage Foundation's Promise to America is for this year.
And where do you think this Restoring America's Promise vibe belongs on our matrix here?
This one is interesting because I would actually put it on the line of conspiracy theory between or the conspiracy axis between noise and signal. Because right now it is not people are not necessarily talking about it. It is pretty much at the back burner in terms of the type of news that we're seeing this week as opposed to this month, right? We live in a time of crisis. And so things like this will probably be under the radar. So I'll put it, exactly where that is right there. Only because the experts have not done a deep analysis on the actual contents of it. A lot of folks in narrative and communications have talked about this kind of idea in relationship to things like the nonprofit killer bill, other passages of anti-choice rules and legislation, passages around banning trans people from voting. And so I would leave it right here, actually.
Jess, do you have a thought about this? It seemed like a good spot for this.
I agree with you, Shaira, that between signal and noise, it's in the middle. I think there are different forces at work trying to either make it signal or make it noise.
That's right.
Sure.
And I think I would actually move it slightly over towards signal. Not straight in the middle of that. Now that I'm reflecting on it, I think it's actually a little bit signal. Not fully. My rationale for that is because I think even though it is I think the stories about it are getting lost in the noise.
Yes.
I think it's actually a signal for how they intend to govern.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not the conversation about it is actually from what I've seen is actually relatively low, just in my little small listening. Many people are not talking about it.
Yes.
But I do think it is a signal towards those in power. I actually would slightly even suggest it's moving up towards reality.
Yes.
I would actually move it more into the reality spectrum. I have two different thoughts on this.
There's so many thoughts. Right?
I know. Well, this one's so complicated.
It is.
What I'm juggling here is the political economy versus the attention economy.
Yeah.
And so I think on the attention economy, it's a little bit more conspiratorial. In the political economy, it's actually more reality.
Right.
Of how the right wing is operating and what Heritage Foundation uses this to signal both to its audience and to the people they're trying to influence inside of governance.
Yeah.
That's where really I'm grappling with that. So I think it's that's what it feels like in his intention right now.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting to me because what I hear and what you're saying is a sort of wrestling with questions about state power, and I think that a lot of the conversation that we've been having broadly online this week has been about the limits of state power, and when we think about Trump quote unquote joking that he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act, it's I think that there's a lot of panic right now about how different actors can use state power, but then how do we tease out the reality of how state power can actually be used?
Yeah.
And it's not clear because things are getting real weird.
Truly.
No, I like this intervention that it's actually maybe a little closer to reality than conspiracy. The other thing that when you were talking, this made me think about too, is that I feel like this is going back towards the way that the Heritage Foundation's reports used to be received, right? Before Project 2025, they do these all the time.
Yes.
But Project 2025 was the first one that was sort of entered the mainstream narrative in a particular way. And that made me feel a little admittedly, during the election cycle in 2024, it made me feel a little bit nuts, specifically because Like, people were talking about it like this is like the first time that this has happened. I'm like, nah, like they've been doing this since like day one at the Heritage Foundation, and like this is how they've been plotting out the future that they're planning for us.
Right. Since the 60s, no?
Yeah. So,
And I think part of something I know that Shaira, you and I have talked about a lot is like narrative isn't just like memes and online stories, right? Narrative is also talking points, policy documents,
yeah.
right? That have been pushed through for years, right? And like I think it's just important is like now we're starting to see their influence more into the public sphere when it's been kind of and they're taking advantage of it,
Yes.
right?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, if we get someone like Taraji talking about Project 2026 on like the big screen, we might bump this all the way up to Signal and Reality on the right, which is exactly what happened with Project 2025. I mean, the BET Awards, she got up on the stage and she was like, hey, if you don't know about this is what they're trying to do. And then the search results for Project 2025 for the next 48 or 72 hours had shot up across, things like Google. So who knows?
Who knows? This could be something we check in on in a couple of months and maybe in a wildly different position. Well, speaking of undercovered stories, I have one for y'all, which is, I feel like this barely registered as a blip, but Beth Israel Synagogue in Jackson, Mississippi, which was bombed by the KKK in 1967 and is on the Mississippi Freedom Trail, was firebombed earlier this month, like I think the first week of January. And I feel like the tiniest blip happened in the news about it. But what's wild is this week we learned a little bit more about the suspect who was arrested because he presented at the hospital with burns to his hands. So this young man is 19 years old. He is a college baseball player. And it turns out this guy is like deep into like Christian identity stuff on the internet, which is like the Christian identity movement is this conspiratorial movement that basically says the Jews are fake Christians. Like, it's deeply anti-Semitic. It is white supremacist. It is really, I mean, it is like all of the things that you think about as like bad conspiracy theory shit on the internet. And it's that. He also apparently ran a website that was about sort of Christian identity, fitness pyramid scheme, something or other. Like it was like a membership site that was supposed to be about like Christian dudes getting fit together. And
he was selling courses.
Yeah, he was selling courses. So like, I think the thing that's wild about this is, first of all, I feel like the fact that, in this time when I think when the Trump administration is weaponizing anti-Semitism, right, against the movement to free Palestine, against the left wing of the political spectrum in this country, we have an actually like deeply violently anti-Semitic kid who's like a white good old boy who, he's a jock. He has been indoctrinated into far right white supremacist like Christian conspiracy theories online. And it strikes me that like the fact that this is not registered outside of like the reason I learned about it is because my like friends of mine who are left-wing Jews were posting about it and, understandably deeply upset about it because it's really, I mean, attacking a house of worship is just like one of those things that like, even as somebody who's not religious, like just strikes me as like deeply, deeply wrong. But then like, I don't know, seeing the story about who this person is, who the suspect is, and like what his whole deal is, I was like, oh, we got to talk about this because he is the kind of person that like MAGA has given permission to in the world to like do as he chooses. He is the anti-Semite, right? Like, and he is not the concern. Like, allegedly the FBI is investigating this as a hate crime, whatever. But like, this is not the like headline anti-Semitism that the Trump administration is talking about. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, this is a high reality story, right? Like this is super material. This is really concrete. And I also think it is high signal, even though what is happening here is about conspiracy. Like I think it teaches us about the way that conspiracy operates in American politics in a way that I think is sadly very instructive.
And I'm also thinking about, I think a similar story that we were beat to death over the head around in New York City in particular, especially because, the right wing is trying to weaponize all kinds of things against the new mayorship of Zohran Mamdani.
Mhm.
But thinking about, the land sale at synagogues in New York City, in Queens in this case, and counter protesters, shouting certain things that then the right wing used to say that like the movement to free Palestine is inherently anti-Semitic, grabbing Zohran Mamdani to basically say like, I condemn Hamas, which, is a talking point of many politicians. But thinking about horrible attacks like this that are then being used to justify that type of speech that says that anyone who stands for the liberation of an oppressed people is inherently anti-Semitic is what the administration is trying to do narratively, to contest what anti-Semitism means and to cement their definition of anti-Semitism while also recruiting members of their base to be fascist, to be anti-Semitic, because a core tenet of fascism and conspiracism is anti-Semitism.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I think that's really just a lot of co-signing with what both of y'all are saying. And I think the people who I saw talking about it, as you said, were Jewish folks, but also Southerners, and who are based in Mississippi and doing freedom work and knowing that this is a threat to all of our collective freedoms.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. And like high signal, high reality, and so much conspiratorial thinking is shaping what is reality. I think, as you were saying, Kate, and I think is spot on, which I think is what makes this framework helpful.
Yes.
Is like, because the story happened. It is verifiable. It is real. We know who did it. We know the harm. We know it's instructive for what's to come. And I really, I think there's a way where I think it really behooves us to not be irreverent about the power of conspiratorial thinking.
That's
Right.
right.
That's totally right. We'll also put I know that Beth Israel is doing a fundraiser to rebuild, and so we'll put a link to their fundraiser in the show notes. So if people are moved to support the Jewish community in Jackson, we'll give people that. Jess, do you have another story for us?
Yeah. So the other story I was having, I think that many of us have been discussing, is the story of Renee Nicole Good.
Hard to talk about anything this week without talking about this.
Exactly. And for folks who, if you don't know, which would be a little bit of a surprise to me, but Renee Nicole Good was a 37-year-old queer woman who was doing ICE watch, ICE verification in Minneapolis, and was shot in the face and murdered by an ICE officer named Jonathan Ross. And people have been mourning her death, her passing. And in the wake of it, we've seen a continued mass escalation of ICE state-based violence in Minneapolis. And also the story has kind of emerged to be talking about the other deaths in ICE custody, whether directly at the hands of ICE or in detention. And part of what I wanted to bring to our conversation is also the multiple flavors of white womanhood that are emerging in this conversation, that have kind of emerged. Right? Because I remember in the kind of the immediate aftermath, so many stories were being told about Renee, some of which seemed to be grounded in truth, some of which did not, right? But we had the stories of like the good white woman of being like, she's a mother and she was never involved in politics, right? The kind of the apolitical white woman, right, who cares about their kids, right? To the J.D. Vance being like, oh, if you're involved in resisting fascism or kind of you're a deranged left-wing lunatic and you don't care about your children because you're showing up to protect other people in other communities, right?
Right.
That is, in many ways, is like the kind of the political instrumentation of the attack on empathy, right? Right. And then you have Becca Good's statement, which is her wife, her widow, who spoke about how how the two of them were doing ice purification because they believed in a better world for their kids and all kids.
Becca's statement fucked me up. Like,
yeah,
I was like, I can't.
Yeah. And I think there's so many different stories about what is white womanhood in this moment. Like, is it apolitical? Do white women have the agency to be self-determining and care for themselves and for others? Or is white womanhood that is rebellious something to be suppressed, which we've known is not an old or a new thing?
Right.
We know Viola Liuzzo was murdered in the course of her civil rights work in the past. We know that's been the case for many white women who have chosen the side of freedom. I feel like there's so many stories about this ICE murder that are kind of all over this map.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a swirling all around this. Yeah.
It feels high signal. There's a lot of noise around it, but it feels high signal. And I actually would love thinking and support around thinking about where conspiracy versus reality on that kind of y-axis, because I think that like it is absolutely true that the ICE murder happened. We know that it was a murder. Like,
yes.
But there are conspiratorial stories around. There was like stories about like false stories. People like she was convicted of abuse, which wasn't true. There was these conspiratorial stories that were like, oh, she was attacking the ICE officer. We really see the elevation from a DHS of being like kind of unverified way of being like the officer who was like who killed Renee was had internal bleeding.
Yeah, from like, what, my guy? Like,
yeah, like there's just there's this kind of a lot of like swirling.
Yeah. Well, and even just like there's so much video of it that then we saw a sort of like AI generated like view of her car appearing to ram somebody that was like from above, and it's like, how did you get this? Like, where is this from? Right? Like there was such a and again, like the AI like deepfake. Synthetically extruded deepfake video has gotten so good that like if you want to believe that,
you can.
Yeah, it's there. You're like, here's material evidence. So there is like a high conspiracy element to this. I think you're right.
Yeah.
The other high conspiracy element to this is the usage of the framework around domestic terrorism to define Renee and what she was doing, which is a constitutionally protected right. So that's definitely related to conspiracy. I think it's also coming to mind just like the relationship between her murder and, the right wing's viewing of white women as, one of the four horsemen of the right wing apocalypse. Like they are the ones that are supposed to cement these values in the home because that is their role. Mm-hmm. And Renee did not necessarily do that in the way that they would like her role as a white woman to do. And so for me, that's where some of the conspiracy is, and also like thinking about this story as like the many different narratives that we've seen, elevated by her widow, folks in her family, by the state, by, the people that knew her and loved her. You can put this all over the Matrix.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the sort of like moment that we're in where like this story is actively being contested in the media, on the internet, whatever, like puts it, I think that's part of like why it's really hard, is because the narrative function of this act of violence is being so hotly contested by so many people right now. I feel like I don't like it when we land like right on the axis. I'm like, ooh, we gotta move it in a direction. But I also am like, it's almost like I want to have like a squiggly part that's like, this is the indeterminate zone.
Yeah.
It's really hard to suss this one out. And I think similarly, I'm having a hard time like landing on something. I do think for the purposes of our discussion and thinking about sort of the role of this story in our media landscape right now, it feels like conspiracy is getting louder and louder to me.
Absolutely.
And so for that reason, I feel like it feels like it needs to drop a little bit into the conspiracy quadrant, but not very much. Just because, like, I don't know, in a lot of ways, this just feels like such a huge political football. And one thing about a political football is like that is rife with like the potential for conspiracy. So that's where I would put it. I think a little bit below the x-axis. Feels weird, man.
It feels so weird.
What a time to be alive. I'm so glad you all are here with me right now because like yeah. Shaira, do you have another story for us?
I mean, if we want to go into Grok,
let's
we're
do
talking
it.
about deepfakes and AI.
My god, I feel like I should have given us a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode because it's just like we're going to talk about murder, we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, we're going to talk about child sexual abuse material. Yikes!
Yeah. Yikes!
It's a yikes.
And again, it feels like it's been 2026 has been 10 years.
Honestly,
but anyway,
already.
Here we go. Tell us about what's going on with Grok.
Yes. So Grok, which is the AI tool within the platform formerly known as Twitter or now known as X, essentially got in a lot of trouble for making deepfakes that were user generated that included explicit material against women. So putting them in little to no clothing. And also that including children, minors. The way that this connects to me with Renee is that they actually did the same thing to her dead body, but put her in a bikini, which so I'm just like, what in the absolute fuck? And thinking about this in terms of the role of AI, the role of Grok in particular, with the state security Department of War apparatus, because Grok is their official AI tool of choice. They've essentially decided to incorporate Grok into the Pentagon and their digital infrastructure. So who is to say what other falsehoods Grok and tools like it will propagate either, in the outcome of a murder or in the outcome of some geopolitical event. So this for me it feels like it's in reality conspiracy, but I think I would put it right under Project 2026 for now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this is so interesting. Also, on the policing of white womanhood, Renee Good situation, In Bed with the Right, the podcast, they had a really good episode that they sort of recorded very quickly that I listened to yesterday, where they also talked about the sort of like gender and sexual implications of sexualizing Renee Good. And I really recommend people listen to it. I think Adrian and Moira do a really good job of kind of breaking down the sexual politics of like what is this doing? What are the like psychosexual elements of like that move? Because it is so, it just, saying that it gives me the ick doesn't begin to capture the feeling inside of my body when I think about it. Like it's like a level of revulsion that is just above and beyond. I feel like this is in some ways also a little noisier than a lot of this stuff because like it's not that it's not important, but it also feels like it feels a little rage baity to me. In that like it's not that it's not real and it's not something that we need to grapple with, but I feel like the way in which Elon Musk and X are sort of responding to critiques is very like flippant and gross. The whole like at first they were like, we're only going to make this available to people who pay for the platform. They're like, we're going to monetize this like illegal abuse material. Like it felt like it was like, ooh, we designed this to make you angry.
Yeah.
And we're going to leverage this to make you angry and like spin this outrage cycle to do something that's about our brand and our identity as this like far right whatever. And so like to me it feels a little noisier. I don't know.
I see where you're coming from, and I'm also like, I wonder in the use of deepfakes and CSAM or just abuse materials generally being paraded around on a social media platform as though it was completely normal and just like another day here at X with our anime waifu, AI Grok tool thingy. I don't even know what she's called. Annie? Is that what her name is? I don't know. I have not been on X in a really long time. But it feels to me like very much we can do whatever we want with the female body or with a child's body, because their rights, their viewpoints, who they are actually doesn't matter. And it's content at the end of the day, and someone's monetizing it, which to me is just like pushing the boundaries of, bodily autonomy, and also like recruiting, younger people who may be using the platform, who thinks that it's like very funny to create material like this because they have been basically recruited into violent misogyny in some ways and see it as completely normal. So I would also probably move it over, not all the way towards noise, but definitely more to the left in that direction. Jess, I see you thinking, so I'm like, what do you got, buddy?
It feels noisier to me. Like, similar to I think there's like the reason why it's not like pure noise, while it's like a little bit closer towards signal, is there's so much. I mean, there's just so much to track. There's so many different stories. Like, I didn't even know the story about Renee. Like,
I mean, this is like new. This is like in the past like 36 hours.
Like, and so I think I felt like a boiling rage in my body for the utterly intense violent misogyny, like just that like is anchoring this content being created. And also the governing, like who governs it, right? So Elon, Grok, et cetera. Like, I mean, I think the truth that we also know about deep fakes and disinformation in general is that it's designed to be noisy to fucking like
exactly
a bunch of stories and be like, what is true in some ways. Like, so I think part of what feels noisy about it to me actually is that there's a clear target of like Elon and Grok, right? And like X as a platform. And then like the I think there's the way it's like, this is being user generated. This isn't us. Kind of, this is the Wild West of
right.
And the way where it's both being entrenched within governing institutions and it's like all like user generated. In that way that feels like open to so much noise. And with very real harm to many, many people.
Right.
And so that like, so I don't want to like discount like the signal sign for like the ways in which that it replicates this very patriarchal like dominance over women and children's bodies.
Absolutely.
And the very real harm that can come from it. And it feels noisier.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that we know as like people who think about narrative, is that noise can be really, really harmful.
Absolutely.
like
on so many levels.
Unimportant to me,
Yeah, no, we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't important on some level.
Exactly.
Another story that I've been losing my mind since I read this article.
Losing your mind generally, but this one in particular,
This one in particular is like it lives rent free in my brain. I think it's going to for a very long time. So there are a bunch of people who bet on a U.S. invasion of Venezuela. On Polymarket, right? The futures betting platform. And a bunch of them are not being paid out for their bet that the U.S. would invade Venezuela because Polymarket is saying that the U.S. didn't technically invade. We just kidnapped their president.
Oh.
So there's so much to break down here. But first of all, there are about to be three of these platforms. It's Polymarket, Kalshi, and then Truth Social is launching their own of these platforms.
Oh, of course.
There's the whole point of these, if you don't know what they are, the whole point of these is that you can place bets on things happening. Anything from like, who's going to win the Super Bowl to, are we going to invade Greenland, right? Like, it's anything. And like, elections outcomes, whatever, there are all of these issues around there. As soon as I say this, I'm sure that everybody's like, oh my God, there's so many obvious issues around like insider trading. The thing that we've been joking about is maybe insider trading is on the outside now. And then again, issues about these things that are not like, it's, whether or not the Buffalo Bills make it to the Super Bowl is like a consensus reality thing that we can measure. But like whether or not the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro counts as invading Venezuela is like apparently a lot more ambiguous. And so like I don't know. There's a lot there that's like very strange. This is a lot of like deeply unregulated or underregulated territory in terms of gambling and betting. The other thing that people need to know is that Donald Trump Jr. is an investor in Polymarket. He is a paid advisor to Kalshi, and he is on the board at Truth Social, which is launching their own prediction market. So, it's like the grift is so out here in the fucking open that it you see now why this lives rent free in my head, because it's like this is the kind of thing that makes me feel like a complete conspiracy theorist. And I think that like the thing that's like not conspiratorial about it is that they're literally just doing this out in the open.
Yeah.
But I also think that this definitely belongs in this sort of like conspiracy noise quadrant. But I do think it is like an indicator about something about our economy, right? That like, I was talking about this last night with a friend of mine who's a professor, and he was like, my students talk about Polymarket odds the way that people who are older than them talk about polling to talk about the political weather. My students are placing bets on Polymarket because they've looked at what people who are our age have gotten from the economy and been like, fuck it, we ball. So there's like something about it that I'm like, it's so crunchy, it's so noisy, and also it's like, oh God, like this is it. I mean, this feels like it feels like a real fall of Rome type of story, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. Like when we were first started talking about this piece, Kate, and I was like, this is breaking my brain in so many different ways. And yeah, there's just so many levels of conspiracy on conspiracy. It's like a matryoshka doll. Where it's both like conspiracy of like U.S. imperialism and domination on top of now it's like conspiracy theory about who's in control of Polymarket and who decides what's invasion and what's not, like, you know, all of that, and thinking about all this being done in capitalism, that this is also like Polymarket is the house, and the house is not trying to lose money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so it feels really noisy, and it feels like a noisy environment, and where you could find signals for things.
Yes.
Yeah.
It feels high conspiracy, mostly because like I think it's like all these things are futures, it's betting, it's uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels noisy. There's a lot of options, right?
Yeah, like maybe it's further to the left even on the noise spectrum.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more noisy. Not that there aren't like signals inside of it, but I think it sits more noisy and it sits more conspiratorial.
Yeah, I can dig that.
And I do wonder at some point, like given how open the grift is be like, oh, how do we align our political like voting patterns to produce a particular outcome to get paid 3 years in advance,
dude,
like 3 years down the line, like, you know, the ways that could like actually become where conspiracies become reality through bettings and people's financial investments in them.
We might actually be in hell.
That's just where I went. I was like,
it's hard not to go there.
Honestly.
Oh my God.
I mean, like Polymarket and tools like it are just like a natural manifestation of capitalism. To me, this is where we were going to head to anyway, because of how pernicious the system has been. But it's also reminding me of the other ways that people adjacent to using Polymarket are getting in trouble for making bets and then doing them illegally. So thinking about like all the athletes from the NBA
sure.
and
that's right. Yeah.
to the MLB, like they're getting in trouble because they are betting and they're making schemes and grifts off of things like Polymarket to rig games where they are in control of the outcome. So I'm like, okay, that's one use, which is not great. And then in the geopolitical realm, like Rico Suave 666.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny. I completely forgot about that, but Can you like summarize what that is about?
Yeah, so he's this like a user on Polymarket who spent like at least $8,000 betting on potential Israeli military action in Iran. And apparently he's also like been pretty successful at political bets and has made like over $150,000 in profits. So I'm like, okay, is this, an insider who has like intel and then is using it to cash out? Is this coincidence? Question mark, definitely conspiracy feeling. But I'm
Yeah.
also like thinking about the reality and the signal of this, right? And the indications of what is to come. Because if you can bet on things like an invasion, if you can bet on political outcomes, if you can bet on, God forbid, like in Minneapolis, ICE is going to shoot another 12-year-old or another woman in the head,
Right.
If Polymarket becomes the stakes on which reality then is contested, and the more, the higher the payout, the more real it'll become. I'm just like, what does this mean for the type of like ecosystem, not just of media, but also of consumerism, right?
Yeah.
Where you can essentially like gamify reality, and hopefully the outcome that you are putting out there is the outcome that you get, and you get like a monetary, you get something out of it. So I'm just like, what does this mean for narrative? What does it mean for the narrative landscape? What does it mean for the media ecosystem? If I can
Yeah.
say like, hey, Trump's suit is going to be blue today and I'm going to make $12,000, or they're going to absolutely invade Cuba next week and
Right.
now I'm going to make 20K off that. Like,
Well, and
anyway.
especially knowing that Donald Trump Jr. is like holding the purse strings of
Yes.
all of these fucking platforms.
Yes.
It's like, I don't. How do you not feel like this is a conspiracy?
Right.
It's crazy.
They use influencers to dictate policy all the time. Nicki
Yeah.
Minaj, bombing of Nigeria on Christmas,
Yeah.
letting Trinidad and Tobago basically like hold military infrastructure for the US as they were prepping to invade Venezuela for the last 6 months.
Mhm.
If you think about an influencer's role in politics, what about a platform's role in politics?
Sure.
And that's where I'm going to crash out.
Yeah. Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
I'm glad we could all crash out together on this one. Oh God. We are running out of time, but I did want to talk a little bit about this story about how ICE has said that they're going to spend $100 million on recruitment, because in light of everything going on in Minneapolis this week, I think it's really interesting. The Washington Post, I think, has this story that taught like a memo was leaked to them about how they're going to spend this money, who they're going after. And they're thinking about like geofencing ads around like gun shows, going after military families, going after fitness influencers, specifically to increase the number of recruits that they get who are like Gen Z and millennials who may be susceptible to some of these ideas. And I specifically wanted to talk about this because Shaira, I know that you've thought a lot about this sort of like, I don't know, where this intersection might be also with QAnon. Like, I feel like this is one of these things that's like they're basically taking the sort of like psychographic profile of a QAnon conspiracy theorist and then turning it into like, how can we get these people to like join Trump's private army? Which I hate. But I think it's an interesting story to talk about in relation to, again, this axis of reality versus conspiracy, because it's almost like they're turning this conspiracy theory then into something that's like really concrete and really specific at a scale and like a scale of ambition that is much greater than we could have ever predicted when we were watching Pizzagate going down. You know what I mean? Like it really is. I mean, it like everybody was like, oh, all of these sort of like Third Reich-esque recruitment posters on the internet felt on the nose, but this shit is even more like, I don't even know what the word is for it. But I have not seen this story, I think, getting the kind of play that I would hope it would, because I think it says a lot about the fracturing of our shared reality, right? And I also feel like it is a fell portent of things to come if we are recruiting people who are already kind of like down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole into a government agency that is already basically run amok, that is, you know, being told explicitly by the administration that they have impunity to do whatever the hell they want.
Right.
I'm not optimistic about it. I'm not sure where this goes, because in a lot of ways it's like, I don't know, it's like taking a conspiracy and then turning it into like material reality in a really different way. So, and also there are parts about it that kind of feel to me a little noisy, in the sense that like it is, again, a lot of saber rattling. In some ways I feel like there's a part of me that's like, was this memo leaked in part to intimidate us, right? To be like, we are recruiting the crazy people. Like, we're recruiting those people who we are scared of, who you are, you know, you live in a different reality from.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think it's like, it says something about who they see their sort of like core constituency to be, who they see their like leading edge to be. But yeah, I'm interested to know what each of you think, where this thing falls.
I would put it on the line of reality and signal, right above or right below the synagogue attack in this matrix. Only because, well, there's many reasons here, but like for me, this is a signal of what's to come. Like if we think about, again, narratives and narrative warfare in particular, the recruitment language in the leaked memo was like, the recruits that they're looking for are to perform their sacred duty, defending the homeland, repelling foreign invaders. And I'm like, this is in line with, you know, the propaganda and the AI slop that they've been, you know, creating and putting on official department social media, like, you know, the Department of Labor, the Department of War, just like really going back to like the popular artwork about like Manifest Destiny in the 1870s, the Catholic Church's like doctrine of discovery of the 1490s. I know this is going real far back, but like this is not just a today thing or this year thing. It is going back several centuries. Like this is the strategy that they use.
The through line is important.
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm like, what else are the things that they are, you know, using and weaponizing? It's ethnocentrism, it's xenophobia, it's chauvinism, right? And so like the parallels here between their very targeted, very specific audiences, right? Because they know who they're looking for. They know who they're targeting. They're kind of the same people that were recruited into QAnon and who are now being offered like a boatload of money to become modern slave catchers. So I'm like, what are the values that undergird, you know, ICE recruitment and QAnon and conspiracism? It's fear. It's the desire to protect themselves and their family. It's the nuclear family. It's the rule of law, obedience, if we want to go back to like Christianity, right? Nationalism. And so the way that the media ecosystem has been so corroded by these types of values towards conspiracism means that the people who are being targeted by ICE recruitment ads are already like set up for success. Like they don't care if the claims are false. They don't care if the disinformation is out there and being used to recruit them. That is based on their reality, their worldview, and their shared values. So I'm like, oh, great. The things that we were joking and laughing about in 2016 are now like being used as a recruitment tool into mass violence against people in this country, whether or not they're undocumented.
Yeah. No, and I think putting it next to the synagogue firebombing, it's just like the kid who did that is also in that population, right?
Yes.
He's like part of that. He's part of that he's part of that fragmented reality. Yikes.
Yeah, I am sitting with this because I think when I think about these recruitment ads, like if we think about it from a place of narrative warfare, this isn't just about who signs up to become ICE agents. It's about getting their message out in front of wide varieties of people, whether or not they sign up or not. So I think that's it's about kind of trying to shape a reality, right, through the conspiracy, right, of like foreign invasion outside the United States. And yeah, I like when I saw that, like who they were trying to target, like I immediately thought of Reframe's like report, down the rabbit hole. I was like, oh, they're going through the pathways that like people found who were kind of apolitical but got organized into QAnon.
Yes.
Around fitness influencers, religion, like church, right? Gamers, I think about what's happening in this moment. I have one thought about this, y'all, is like there's a hunch for me that this is a little bit more noise right now than it is signal. Part of it is like 100 million is a scatter shot. Like they're going after all these like categories, like where there are pathways, there are tracks found, the conspiratorial thinking, the right wing, etc. But my guess, given all the AI stuff, they're testing out, they're putting a bunch of noise out and then seeing what's working.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And they're putting money behind that. And so it was having me think that, I feel like it's noise that's aiming to be signal.
Okay.
Yeah. So like maybe it belongs just the other side of the zero there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now. Like, I think it's a signal for something that's like, I wouldn't put it all the way towards noise, but I would put it kind of where it's at right now, because it seems a little bit like they're going to try to put a bunch of noise out. I'm thinking about like even the image that this, like the picture of this is on, is like that, like stories about the headline that's on her podium, right? Where it's like that Nazi frame of like one of ours, all of yours, like, which is like a slogan that the literal Nazis used to commit genocidal ethnic cleansing on a town. It is mind-bogglingly horrible. But like all of it is like there's a noise about that. There's the ICE recruitment as like what's coming out. There's like part of I heard the story that like ICE is right now has not re-signed a contract with Spotify. So like, and was it a win from organizing, or did they just pull out? It seemed like they just pulled out for the time being, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so I just feel like there's a lot of different pieces of noise. Like, and I feel curious about what parts of it, other recruitment process, will be signal and what parts will be noise. That's my thinking. Right now.
I take that.
I could be compelled and organized back towards the category.
You like organized me in this direction, so
I know. Same here. I was like, I found that to be very compelling.
Yes.
Well, we have an attention economy matrix. We did it, y'all. This one was grim. I don't know.
This is so grim. I know we were thinking about talking about a heated rivalry to add some kind of pop culture element.
But yeah, we had to spend the time we had on the graph that we made.
I know.
Shaira, Jess, these are dark times, but I'm glad I get to spend time thinking about them with you. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you all for being here too.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. My thanks again to Shaira and Jess for joining us today. This show is published by Convergence, a magazine for radical insights. I'm Kaden Mock, and our producer is Josh Elstrom. Kimmy David designed our cover art. Convergence Magazine is a proud founding member of the Movement Media Alliance. If you have something to say, you can, of course, drop me a line. You can send me an email that we'll consider running on an upcoming mailbag episode at mailbag@convergencemag.com. And finally, if you would like to support the work that we do at Convergence, bringing our movements together to strategize, struggle, and win in this crucial historical moment, you can become a member at convergencemag.com/donate. Even a few bucks a month goes a long way to helping our independent small team continue to build a map for our movements. I hope this helps.